I am too, but I need a cough drop too at the same time.
Oh, hey,
I don't know.
ruin the flavor.
I don't know if it's like allergies and I'm just like training to let it go.
I had way too much fun. Add a little more popcorn. That one's done. Um, we just don't eat.
morning. Good morning. Yeah, it's on. It's not really on. Hello.
Might be a little higher.
Check. Oh, yeah, that's a hot one. Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm really excited to be here. This is fun. We've got a lot that we're going to cover today, so I'm going to move kind of quick through a few things, but I have to ask, give me something good this morning. Fire it off. What do you got? I'll tell you one of mine. I have mice in my house, and the Orkin man showed up today, and I am so grateful for that. Also, while I was waiting, I programmed my garage door openers, which felt like it was a monumental task, and I got it done in 10 minutes. And now I don't have to climb through the snow when it shows up. So that's something good. Okay, now I want one more. Yeah, Chris.
I just got found out that a house I'm about to start the list next week is a $6,000 boiler repair. And then I got 2 more bids. And the guy I go in this morning said, actually, it's loose wire.
Wow, one clap for that. Thank goodness for loose wires. I feel that. That's awesome. Okay, so we're going to cruise through a few upcoming things that we have happening. We have JL Collins here, who I will introduce, and we're going to spend about 25 minutes, 30 minutes connecting with him. I'm going to bring him through some questions and let him share. And at the end, we'll have time for you guys to ask questions. So rather than like popping in and out of questions while he's chatting, write them down. So if you don't have something to write with, write your questions down as they come up, and then we'll leave some time at the end of his time. And then we've got all of our brokers from the collective here, and they're going to update you on what's happening with the NAR lawsuit, how MLS is responding, really relevant topic for you guys, and you can ask questions around that too. All right, let's rock and roll. What is this? Oh, check in. What are we doing? We are actually taking attendance for a reason. We want to know what's valuable to you guys. We want to know in person versus Zoom. It is really helpful for us to make decisions with data rather than based on feeling. So thank you for checking in. Jake is leading Leadership Academy tomorrow. You do not have to be in an official leadership position. We are all leaders of ourselves and in our families, so everyone is welcome to show up. Quick scoop on what he's covering. He's got what's keeping you from running your business with authenticity, and what is the cost of that? What is the value that your clients are expecting versus what you're delivering? And what are the 2024 thinking patterns that might be holding you back? So he'll dive into all of that tomorrow. That is at Lake Minnetonka in person only from 11 to 12:30. Objection Jeopardy. We're going to have some fun. So over at the Edina Market Center, this is a collective event on October 31st. Costumes are welcome. Obviously, it's a costume party, so you should wear one. Okay. She Speaks. We did this in October for the first time. So this is a women's group for the collective that I am leading. And we're listening to one podcast episode before we show up to that. And then we're diving in and building relationship. Those women that were there, I think, had a pretty great time. Yeah, Abby? Yeah, it was really great. So if you want to connect with us, I'd love for you to be there. That will always be at Edina, first Thursday of every month at 1 o'clock. Okay, we won't go there yet. We'll do that at the end. We'll bring JL in. Okay. Oh, for those of you that know me, I'm Jen, or don't know me, I'm Jen. I'm the general manager of the collective, and I don't think JL knows me, but I'm not going to read you my bio. So, and I'll let Bethany bring him in. So JL Collins, if you don't know, how many of you have read The Simple Path to Wealth? Oh, good. This is going to be good. This is like one of the, like if somebody was like, what are the top 5 financial independence wealth building books to read? This would be one of them without a doubt. He's a best-selling author. He is known as the godfather of financial independence. So for those of you that want to have financial freedom, you are absolutely in for a treat today. JL, welcome. We're really honored and happy to have you here today.
I'm honored to be here, Jen, and it's a pleasure to meet you. I look forward to the conversation.
Wonderful. We're gonna get the volume tuned up, and then one other tech thing. Can I get him pinned bigger on that back so I'm not looking over here? Is that possible? Back TV. JL, could you speak again?
Sure. I'm here to chat with you, Jen.
There's the base I was looking for. All right, JL, I did just a brief introduction to who you are. If you want to give another intro and or love to kind of hear a little bit, I loved as I read this book to hear about why you started writing it and how it was birthed. Would you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. So I think your introduction did me more justice than I deserve. So we won't bore people with more on that. Pathfinders actually came out of The Simple Path to Wealth, which I published in 2016. And within months of having published that book, I started getting feedback from readers about how they had taken the principles in it and adapted it to their own unique situation, both where they were, what stage of life they were in, and also where in the world they were. And that was fascinating to me because I wrote this book for one specific person, my daughter. She was in college at the time, so at the beginning of her journey, and she's an American. So it's a very US-centric book, and it has a little bit of a bias, I think, towards people who are at the start of their journey. And yet, people from all over the world and from all different stages of their journey found value in it and were able to take the basic principles, look past the specific things that maybe didn't apply, and figure out how to make it work for them. And I just loved hearing those stories. And for years now, I've wanted to produce them and share them. And Pathfinders has been 2 years in the making, and now it's out.
That's awesome. Yeah. So Pathfinders is the book that's newly released, and we'll give you guys details on that if you want to order that. We'd love that. Jill, can we back up a little bit, and can you talk about the premise of The Simple Path to Wealth, or the sort of staples of what are simple things that people can do to build a path to wealth?
Right. So again, I wrote this for my daughter because, as my friend Christy Shen likes to say, if you understand money, life is incredibly easy and rich. If you don't understand money, it can be incredibly difficult. So like most parents, I wanted the best for my kid. Unfortunately, I pushed things way too hard, way too soon when she was young, and turned her off to all things money. And she likes to tease me now. And she says, Dad, if I'd listened to you when I was young, there'd be no blog, there'd be no Chautauqua meetings, there'd be no books, Keller Williams wouldn't be asking you to talk to them. So that's kind of the truth. But the fundamental principles of The Simple Path to Wealth are simple. It's avoid debt, live on less than you earn, and invest the difference. And The Simple Path to Wealth focuses a lot on exactly what that means to invest the difference.
So maybe we should start with debt. You guys, do you want to talk about debt today? Yeah, lots of smiling faces in here right now. I just got an article from a friend of mine, and John Dick is the author of this article, and he said news headlines are celebrating the consumer's quote unquote resiliency because, and this is in relation to debt. So our debt is how many times higher than it's ever been. The rates are higher than it's ever been. As consumers, we've been spending in post-pandemic frantic desire to feel good again. And so this author is saying news headlines are celebrating the consumer's resiliency, quote unquote, the way I might celebrate my ability to still day drink like a college kid on a rare occasion, both ignoring the inevitable hangover, which gets progressively worse, and more miles that we've logged. So let's hear your take on debt.
Well, my take on debt is it's a ball and chain that you drag around with you. It's akin to being covered with blood-sucking leeches. And it's kind of dumbfounding to me that it is so widely accepted as being normal in our country. It doesn't feel normal to me. I abhor it. And my advice is to take your sharpest knife out and start scraping those little bloodsuckers off, because there's no way you can be financially free if you're carrying around debt. So that's job number one. It's as my friend Mr. Money Mustache likes to say, if you're carrying debt, it's a hair on fire emergency. So that's job one. Now, the silver lining of that is if you organize your life in such a fashion that you free up money to pay down your debt, well, now you've created an amazingly valuable discipline. First of all, you're living on less than you earn, which is part of the simple path, and you are diverting that money to a very important cause, paying off debt. Once the debt's blown out, you just continue that, and now you start paying that same money to yourself. You start buying your freedom with it.
Yeah, like you said, it seems really simple, right? I like how you said we organize our lives so that we can establish habits to pay down the debt. And then we take that money and start investing. That, I think, is one of the hardest things, right? Like if we've been spending to our limit and above our limit, what do we have to do to get to a point where we can actually pay off debt? Make really hard decisions. I think at one point in your book, you said it's less about what you earn and more about your values. Did you say that that relates to this kind of how we choose to organize our life?
Right. And it's also less about what you earn and more about how much you keep. Right. So you're exactly right. And when I referred to early in our conversation about people at different stages of their life coming to the book, there's a whole section in Pathfinders, stories from people who have dealt with lifestyle inflation, which is the term for letting your lifestyle grow too quickly and to maximize your resources, maybe even exceed your resources, which pulls you into this consumer debt nightmare. So absolutely that needs to be unwound, excuse me. But that doesn't mean it's easy. It is simple. There's no magic solution to getting out of debt. And I think all of the, different programs that are offered are just ways for people to prey on those who are in debt. It's getting out of debt is real simple. You just have to start paying it down. My recommendation is a financial way. I would say pick out the highest interest rate debt you have, focus on that, get that out, and then go to the next one because that's the most financially powerful way to do it. There is a school of thought that says now what you should do is you should pick your smallest debts, regardless of the interest rate, and pay those off first because that gives you a psychological boost of seeing those go away. I guess if you do what works for you, I'm not hugely in favor of psychological crutches like that. I'm more inclined to say, look at what is financially optimal and do that. But again, the important thing is to start doing it, and you just have to take that step.
So recently, I didn't grow up in a very financially literate home. And over the last couple of years, I've been reading all of the things that I can to figure out, like, how can I achieve financial freedom as quickly as possible? And through Mr. Money Mustache and your resources, came across the 4% rule. And I'm going to have you dive into that in a second, but I'll just speak from my experience. Understanding the simplicity of that rule is what gave me the motivation to readjust my lifestyle, pay down the debt, and start investing. And because that understanding that rule made me realize, like, oh, freedom is really possible, and it doesn't have to be 50 years away. It can be 12 years away if I get really aggressive. So can you speak to what is the 4% rule?
Sure. So the 4% rule was created by a financial advisor in, I want to say, the early 90s. And then there were 3 professors at Trinity University in Texas who put together a pretty comprehensive research project behind looking at that. And that came to be known as the Trinity Study. And they looked at all kinds of withdrawal rates, all kinds of, percentage withdrawal rates annually, different mixes between stocks and bonds. And basically, when you stood back and looked at those charts, which I reproduce in The Simple Path to Wealth because they're very enlightening, something popped out to some of the reporters looking at it at the day, and that was that if you had at least 50% stocks in your portfolio and you withdrew 4% a year and you adjusted it for inflation every year, there was a 96% chance that your money would last at least 30 years. Those are pretty good odds. And so that became commonly known as the 4% rule. I don't like the word rule because there's been a lot of ink spilled recently about, well, Is 4% really the right percentage going forward? You know, should it be more? And some people think that it should be, including the guy, I guess, that originated. Some people are saying, no, it's much too aggressive. It should be 3.92 or whatever. That's just nonsense in my view. It's a wonderful guideline. And it's a guideline that gives you a good sense of where you stand in terms of financial independence. And it's a very simple formula. You can look at it from two different ways. You can look at how much you need to live on to be financially independent, because that's the definition, right? Money is throwing off enough to cover your needs. Or you can look at how much you have and calculate from there. So let's suppose you need $40,000 a year to meet your needs. You multiply that by 25, that gives you $1 million. So that tells you that you need $1 million invested, and you can withdraw 4% of that, which is $40,000. And of course, that's the other side of the formula. If you know you have $1 million, or let's say you have $1.5 million, now you take that, and what's 4% of 1.5 million? Well, that's 50,000. So now you know, oh, I've got 50,000 a year that I can comfortably spend and expect it to last for an extended period of time. Now, the caveat, of course, is the 4% rule suggests that you can just set it and forget it because it's a rule. I think anybody would be insane to do that. Because first of all, there's 4% of the time where it doesn't work and you don't want to run out of money. But more importantly, there's a huge percentage of time where not only does it work, but at the end of 30 years, you would have far more money than you started with. Now, it seems to me that I want to be watching both those things. I don't want to run out of money, but I also don't want to not have the ability to enjoy the much more likely scenario where my money is growing so dramatically. So choose 4% as a guideline and pay attention.
Yeah. And maybe I should back up just like real briefly. Financial independence. I mean, can you define it really quick? I don't want to try to do it in front of you.
Sure. Financial independence. Why I think of it as two stages. Financial independence is the end stage where you have enough money that your money can earn enough money to support your needs and desires. So again, that goes back to that 4% formula. So, you know, if you want to spend $100,000 a year, well, you know that you need $2.5 million because 25 times 100,000, right? So we've been through that. So that's financial independence. But I think people sometimes say, wow, that's such a huge amount of money and it seems so unattainable, and then they just don't get started. It's important to realize that it's not an on-off switch. Just like going to the gym. The first time you go to the gym, you're not going to be bench pressing 300 pounds, but you will be a little stronger than you were the day before. And you get stronger and stronger as time goes on until you hit whatever your goal is. Same thing with financial independence. There are interim steps. The moment you start saving and investing, you become financially a little bit stronger. And I refer to that as the acquisition of FU money. So FU money makes you stronger and makes you able to be bolder in your decisions. And it's the steps you take that get you ultimately to being financially independent.
There were chuckles in the room when you said FU money. And I don't know if people realize there's a whole chapter in your book on this. So can you dive into what is FU money? Why is it valuable? Why was it valuable to you? How has that informed kind of your life journey and how you've spent your time and years?
Well, so certainly. So first of all, I should explain what FU stands for. It stands for forget you. So I'm sure that's what was in everybody's mind.
Absolutely, it was.
Money. So forget you money. As I say, it's that interim step, and it could be a surprisingly modest amount of money. I first came. It's a term that I first came across in a novel by James Clavell, A Noble House, and Clavell has a character in that novel, a woman who has her stated goal is having FU money. And it was one of those things where I knew what I wanted, but I never had a name for it. And the moment I read that, it crystallized, yeah, that's what I want right there. That's, and this is long before I heard the term financial independence, but I knew I wanted that FU money. And for me, the first time came when I had the princely sum of $5,000. Now, to be clear, this was back in the 70s, and that was a lot more money than it is today. But I was in my first professional job out of college. Coming out of college in the 70s was a tough time with stagflation. It took me 2 years to get this job. I liked it. But I also wanted to go to Europe and backpack for a year, and $5,000 would have been enough to do that. And in those days, I didn't realize that you could negotiate things. And frankly, in those days, negotiating things with your employer was not nearly as common as it is today. So I thought long and hard about this. And I suddenly came across a special airfare that for a very low amount of money would get me to Europe as long as I guaranteed that I would come back in 4 months. I thought, well, that's kind of a balance. It's not the year I want, but it's 4 months. So I went to my boss and I said, I'd like to go away for 4 months and come back to my job. And he looked at me like I had two
Did he
heads.
say F you is what I want to know.
Yeah, he said, forget you.
That's what I thought. That's what I
slightly
might say.
different words, but he looked at me like I'd taken leave of my senses and said something like, of course not, don't be silly, go back to work. And so I did. And I thought that was the end of it. And I thought, well, now I have to really decide this, right? So I spent another week or two pondering, do I want to keep this job that was hard to get that I like, or do I want to go to Europe for a year? And I figured, well, I'm never going to be in my mid-20s again, and I really do want to go to Europe for a year. So a week or two later, I went back to his office and I quit. And he said, why are you quitting? And I said, well, I want to do this Europe thing. And he said, whoa, no, don't do anything hasty. let me talk to the owner of the company. And I'm slow, but I'm not entirely stupid. And, suddenly I realized that something remarkable was happening because I had FU money. And he came back in a few days and he said, if you can promise that you will be back at the end of that 4 months, then we're willing to do that. And that was the first time I experienced the power of FU money. And it was a surprisingly modest amount of money.
That's awesome. That is powerful. Yeah. And you hear so many talk about why do you want money? And I think for a lot of us at the end of the day, it's about freedom, right? That's what the FU money is. It's the freedom to make the choice in the moment and never be stuck. You lost your video.
Absolutely. It's let me see if I can get that. There we go. I'm sorry.
Gotcha. Oh, good. Yeah, all about the freedom. That's great. Okay, let's take a pivot and talk about the stock market.
Okay.
Topic. I listened to your book over the weekend and you talk a lot about a bear market and bull market and the concerns that people have on when to invest and when to divest. And there's so many things we could talk about the stock market, but you obviously are a proponent of investing in it. Can you just give us kind of the principles that you look at in terms of investing or advice you would give to somebody that is maybe not dipped their toes in yet, is considering it?
Great question. So I think one way to think about it, and I talk about this in the book, in The Simple Path to Wealth, is think of the stock market as a mug of beer, right? So you're looking at a mug of beer and you can't see through the glass because it's a mug, right? It's a solid mug. But because you've had beer before, that there's a certain amount of foam on top. And then there's the actual beer that's underneath it. And you don't know exactly how much foam is in that mug because you didn't see the person pouring it. Could be a lot of foam at that particular time or fairly minimal foam. Well, that's kind of like the stock market. So the foam is what you hear about on CNBC all the time. That's the short-term fluctuations in stock prices. That's the people who are trading stocks. And that's what is talked about. That's not, in my world, investing. That's speculating. That's trading. That's the foam. We're in it for the beer. The beer is the actual companies that are represented by those stocks. Because when you buy stock, you are buying a piece of a company. In a very real sense, you are now an owner. And that gives you the right to the profits that company throws off in the form of dividends, and also the growth, hopefully, that that company provides. So when you invest in index funds, which is my recommendation, and the one I invest in is VTSAX, which is Vanguard's total stock market index fund. Well, that holds virtually every publicly traded company in the United States. That's about 4,000 companies. And that means by holding VTSAX, every one of those companies, everyone from the factory floor to the CEO is working to make me richer. Now, the beauty of index funds is that they're self-cleansing. And what that means is I don't have to worry about which of those companies are going to do well and which are going to fail, because those that fail will drift off the index. And the most that you can lose is 100%, which sounds awful, until you realize the most you can gain is 100, 200, 10,000, 100,000%. There's literally no limit to the upside. So in that sense, it's a rigged game in our favor. The other thing that I would say about the stock market, so when you buy VTSAX, before I leave that, my holding period for that is forever. Because it's self-cleansing, unlike buying individual stocks, I never have to worry about when to sell it or when that company is gone through its life cycle and is on the way down. So I can hold that forever. And that's what I do. Now, the thing to understand about market corrections, and so you have a market correction, which is considered about a 10% drop in stocks. A bear market's considered 20%. Crash is something higher than that, 30, 40, sometimes really ugly, 50%. The thing to understand about those is that they are a perfectly normal part of the process. When these things happen, the media goes absolutely nuts, and you would think the world was ending. And of course, the world doesn't end. What happens is the market goes down for a little while, recalibrates itself, and then it begins its relentless march up again. And that will always continue until the country stops being a viable capitalist system, right? That's until that happens. So as long as the United States is a viable country, or if you're investing in a world fund, as long as there are viable countries in the world and economies in the world, that process will always continue. It will always recover. It recovered after the Great Depression. It recovered after the debacle in 07, 08. That will always, always recover. And that's the important thing to remember. It's like hurricanes in Florida, blizzards in New England. It's a perfectly normal part of the process. Now, like hurricanes and blizzards, they can be very dangerous, right? Stock market declines can be very dangerous, usually if you do something stupid, like if you go out in the hurricane or you go out in the blizzard, right? But if you hunker down and stay the course, whether it's a blizzard or a hurricane or the stock market, you will be fine. And the other thing I'll say on that subject is if you are adding to your stock holdings, if you are building your wealth, market declines are your friend because it allows you to buy stocks on sale. It's a little bit incredible that when stocks go on sale, everybody panics and runs for the exit. Anything else in your life that goes on sale, you say, wow, let's get myself to the store and let's start buying. So declines when you're building wealth are your friend. The best thing that could happen to somebody just beginning their financial journey is a major market drop.
It's powerful. One thing that keeps coming to mind, I don't think I read it in your book, but along with stock market and the 4% rule and living off of a 4% draw, maybe you can correct me if this is wrong. I had heard that if I'll use myself as an example, if I can get my cost of living and my lifestyle down to 50% of my take-home pay, and if I take that other 50% and invest it, if it's giving me the minimum return that we would expect, and I can live off of a 4% draw every year, then once I hit that, like whatever the amount is that you named earlier, my lifestyle, and I keep my lifestyle there, then I will have financial freedom at that point. Is that 50% rule? Am I remembering that right?
Right. Well, I write about that in The Simple Path to Wealth. And a 50% savings rate is what I chose to do back in the day. So my first professional job in 1974 paid me $10,000 a year. And I knew that there were people at the time who were living on $5,000. I come out of college and I was living on even less than that. So I knew I could construct a lifestyle that I won $5,000. And to me, the most important thing I could buy with my money was my financial freedom. So I've said to people who say this sounds like deprivation, I've spent, I like to spend money. I've spent every dime that ever came into my possession. The difference is that I spent half those dimes buying the thing that was most important to me, and that's my financial freedom. And then the other part of that is, as my income grew, so did the amount I was investing, of course, because that 50% grew, but also so did my lifestyle. So when I was making 20,000, I was living on 10, twice as much as I started with. When I was making 100,000, I was living on 50. So I allowed my lifestyle to inflate, but in a very controlled fashion, because I was spending that 50% to buy my freedom. Now, I did an interview earlier this morning, and the guy said, you brought this subject up of 50%. He said, that probably makes you sound insane. And I said, yeah, you can make a case that I'm insane, but not for that reason. Because 50% is perfectly doable. And when I put that out on my blog, and there are a lot of people, of course, who are reading the blog who are on this path, some of the feedback I got was, wow, 50%, I can't imagine how anybody could possibly do that. But the other half of the feedback I got was 50%, you piker, you could do much better than that. I'm saving 60 or 70 or even 90%. So it's absolutely doable. It just depends on how motivated you are and what you want to spend your money on. And for me, there was nothing more important than buying my freedom.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. If you knew that for the next 10 years, if I lived on 50% of what I earned, invested the rest, watched that compound, and by the time I'm 51, 52, I had all of the freedom in the world to live the lifestyle I want while my income is probably also still going up, that's pretty motivating to me. But I think, again, it comes back to like, are we willing to make those decisions? Am I willing to drive an embarrassing car, or whatever the things are? Like I was thinking, if I didn't have kids, I'd get a roommate again. I don't know. Like it's short term, that's just me.
One of the things that I love about Pathfinders, the new book, it's 100 stories of from people all over the world who are following this path. And one of the things that's always irritated me a little bit is the pushback from people who come across the financial independence idea and community, and they say, "Oh, that sounds lovely, but that's only for, engineers, high income people." And I tell folks that if you read this book, you'll hear stories of people who started with much less than you, probably much less than anybody else and who have made it happen. You will never again be able to say it can't be done. Now, of course, you always have the choice of saying, well, I choose not to do it. But after you've read Pathfinders, you'll never be able to say it can't be done. You'll never be able to say at the end of 20, 30 years when you're broke, gee, I didn't know, because you will know. But you can certainly choose to do whatever you want. It's your money. So if somebody says to me, the biggest possible house I can afford is more important to me than my financial freedom, or fancy cars or a fancy wardrobe or whatever it is, those things are more important. Well, it's your money. It's your life. I'm God bless you. And I'm fully aware that that's the way the vast majority of Americans will choose. But at least if you read this book, you will know that there's another option.
It's possible, and that it's simple. It's powerful. We have time for a couple of questions. Does anybody have a question? Aaron.
I'm just wondering if you have thoughts on good debt when it comes to mortgages.
You guys are going to like this. JL, do you know who you're speaking to today? It's a room full of realtors. So I'm going to give you that pro tip. Aaron is asking if you can speak to good debt as it relates to mortgages, etc.
You know, I do know
Loans.
who I'm speaking to. But I'm also the guy who, when I was giving my Google talk, told those employees that they should divest their Google stock. So
he's not one to back down from his opinion, folks.
yeah, I didn't even realize that was a problem until Hassan Minhaj, who wrote the foreword, called it my savage Google talk because of that comment. So I am somewhat famous or infamous, depending on your point of view, for a post I wrote on the blog called "Why Your House is a Terrible Investment," and that post is the most widely read of all of them. It has garnered me the most hate and the most love. And it's also, I think, confused people on my attitude towards housing or houses. So I have owned houses most of my adult life. So I'm not against owning houses. What I'm against is this idea that is always the best possible thing you can do at any stage of your life. And I'm also against the idea that you should buy the absolute most house that your lender tells you you can possibly afford. I look at it and I say houses are expensive indulgences. I mean, I have no problem with expensive indulgences. As I say, I've owned houses most of my adult life. I never owned them thinking they'd be a great investment. Some of them have turned out okay, some of them not so much, but they always provided the lifestyle that I wanted and was willing to pay for at the time. And I think that if you look at housing that way, and you buy the least house that meets your needs, that you buy from a position of strength, so you're not overextending yourself, then I have no problem with buying houses. And as I say, I've owned them most of my adult life. I own one now. In fact, actually, I own two now. I have a condo in Florida as well that we just bought this spring. So I'm thinking about writing a post called "Mr. Anti-House Loses His Bloody Mind." But anyway.
He bought a second one, folks. What about student loan debt? What would you say to that?
Oh, that's a tough one for me. You know, it's that of course has come long after I was out of college. I think it is reprehensible that we have created a system where we take 8-year-olds and we have the government guaranteeing this debt, which means lenders are way too eager to push this money on kids that really have no idea what they're undertaking. And the other thing that bothers me about it is whenever you can take anything and figure out a way that people can borrow money to buy it, that thing gets considerably more expensive. And you see that dramatically in education. When I went to college, I put myself through college, but college was a much more basic affair. You know, the kind of dorm room I lived in, the kind of off-campus housing I had at the time, it was just incredibly different than when my daughter went to college in when she go in 2010. You know, just in those days, it was the lifestyle that these schools had created was just much more lavish. Well, that's because they could charge more for what they were doing. So I think student debt is a tragedy of our era. And I don't quite know how to advise kids around it because college has gotten so expensive that there are situations where it's maybe almost impossible to not take it on. But there are people more focused on that subject who have written about how to do it with minimal or no debt. And I would say that's at that point above my pay grade. But I think it's a terrible thing that's happened to our young people.
Sure. Any other questions?
What's your advice on asset allocation? I know it depends on your age and situation, but for someone who's like
Wait. Hold up, please.
So my question, what's your advice on asset allocation for someone who's in late 20s, and how much percentage of the investment money going to real estate versus stocks versus like crypto, etc.?
Asset allocation,
Right.
stocks, crypto, yeah, percentages.
Yeah, so let me start with the real estate. I have been an investor. Now we're not talking about home ownership, but investment in real estate. I have been an investor in real estate when I was younger, and I did okay with it. I actually have my second book talks about the very first piece of real estate I bought, which was a bit of a disaster. So that's a cautionary tale. So I'm not a real estate investor. I came to the conclusion that it's just too much like work for my taste. And that's an important thing to recognize, is that when you invest in real estate, it's not just an investment, it's more of a hybrid of an investment and a part-time job. Whereas if you invest in index funds, it doesn't take any of your time, or it takes a very minimal amount of your time. So in my world, there's two investments. There's a total stock market index fund. As I said, the one I use is VTSAX. And then if and when the time comes that you need it, there's a total bond market index fund, which is BLTEX. Also, I use the Vanguard version. Now, for my daughter, who's 31 now and working, I advise her, and I advise everybody who reads The Simple Path to Wealth, when you're working and you are diverting part of your income to build your wealth, VTSAX, Total Stock Market Index Fund, is all you need. And I get pushback on that occasionally, and people say, well, that doesn't sound very diversified, owning just one thing. But bear in mind, with that one fund, you own every publicly traded company in the United States. So that's very diversified. When I was young and investing before index funds, the idea of a diversified portfolio, the advice was you pick about 8, maybe at the outside 10 different sectors, and you pick 1 or 2 stocks in each sector, and that's the maximum anybody can follow, reasonably be expected to follow. That means you're going to own somewhere between 14 to 20 companies, and now you're diversified. So with one fund, I own 4,000 companies. I feel very diversified. Thank you very much. What happens when you have earned income is that cash flow that you're putting into that fund allows you to benefit from those stock market drops, right? So it smooths the ride in that sense. So as long as my daughter or anybody listening keeps putting money in every month, doesn't panic and stop when the market sells, and God forbid doesn't panic and sell out, because don't follow my advice. If you're going to panic and sell out, you'll end up bleeding at the side of the road. But assuming you can stay the course and you keep adding, those stock market drops become your friend. They become something you don't fear, you look forward to. Now, when the time comes that you're living on your portfolio, you quit your job, you don't have that earned income, then at that point, you might want to think about having something else to smooth the ride. And in my world, that's that total bond market index fund. So you have the bonds that tend to run counter to stocks. So when stocks are plummeting, if you're living on the portfolio, you have something to draw from that's other than stocks, so you don't have to sell them when they're down. And you also have some dry powder if you want to add some more into the stocks while it's down, which you do when you rebalance, right? So if you set a certain allocation, say 70% stocks, 30% bonds, if stocks drop, maybe that allocation drops to 65, 35, well, you can take that extra 5% of your bonds and buy more shares on sale. So that's how I look at it. And by the way, in the FI community, it's not so much linked to age anymore as it was even in my generation, where the norm was that you went out and you worked for 40 years and then you retired. I know a lot of people in the FI community who've retired when they were 30. And, then after 5 years, maybe they get tired of being retired and they go back to work, or they start up some company or whatever, and they start making money again. So in my world, you can go in and out of of being accumulating wealth and living on your portfolio. And accordingly, your allocation can change.
This is powerful. I have a list of like 14 questions I didn't get to. So I want to direct people to resources for you and also say this obvious thank you. JL is donating his time today, and we're really appreciative of that. I found it was so interesting. Kari Landine is one of our agents at one of our offices, and she was wanting to hear from JL, and she Googled him and found his email and emailed him, and he said, "Yeah, I'd be happy to talk with you." And I was like, "Who does that?" And so she emailed him and said, "Would you be willing to join a team meeting?" And he said, "Yeah, I'd be happy to do that." And I was like, "What? The godfather of financial independence is going to be here?" So thank you so much for taking your time. It feels like if you guys listen, you should listen to the book. Kari kept telling me, get it on audiobook. And can you see why she recommended that? Just like listening to him and knowing that this content came out of blog posts that he wrote for his daughter. And JL, it makes me a little emotional. The whole time I was listening, I was like, oh, this is like if my dad had written a book for me. It's like,
My daughter likes to tell me now that, I had to write this stuff down because she wouldn't listen to me when she was young. And she says, Dad, if I'd listened to you, there'd be no blog, there'd be no Chautauqua conferences, there'd be no books. Keller Williams wouldn't be asking you to speak. You wouldn't have any
divine intervention. Yes.
I owe it all to the little girl who wouldn't listen.
A little stubborn. Yeah. So thank you. So rather than him asking for pay, JL has shared one of his favorite, do you want to put that up on the screen? Yeah, one of his favorite charities. Do you want to say anything about them, JL?
Sure. This is, wait till you get it on the screen. Oh, it's
the QR code right now.
But QR code. So yeah, it's a charity called Adopt a Native Elder. It's very highly rated, gets absolute top ratings from Charity Navigator for efficiency and actually getting the money out to the people who it's designed for. It's a very small charity based out of Utah, run by a woman named Linda Myers. And basically what they do with a large team of volunteers is they will take food and firewood and yarn and things, because a lot of these native elders are weavers. They make rugs that they then sell, and they do most of this work on the Navajo reservation. And like a lot of native reservations, it's mired in poverty. A lot of these people live in very remote hogans, frequently without running water or electricity. And they are elders, so they're people in their 80s and 90s, and it's just a wonderful activity that she's put together, and I've been a supporter of it for I don't know, probably going on 10 years now. And of all the places that I have given money over the years, and I'm a big believer in doing that, I think this is the one I feel best about. I like the mission and I like the efficiency. I'm a financial guy, so of course I like the efficiency.
Wonderful. And then we've got information for your second book, Pathfinders, here, so you guys can pre-order it. It releases in just under a week, correct? Tuesday?
Yep, on Halloween, the 31st.
All right. All right, JL, thank you so much. Thank you for your time. We appreciate you being with us today.
It's an honor to be here, and I hope you could tell I enjoyed it as much as you.
Pleasure to have you. All right. Brokers, you want to head on up? Hey, I'm just gonna pass the mic.
You wanna go there?
No.
You wanna go there? All right.
Hey, everybody. Yeah, I'm Claire. I feel like we should probably introduce ourselves because I don't think that everybody knows everybody from the other market centers. So I'm Claire Shaw. I'm the broker for the KW Lakes.
I'm Kevin Campbell. I'm the broker for KW Lake Minnetonka.
I'm Matt Brady. I'm the broker at KW Integrity Edina. I'm also the compliance broker for Elk River and Minnetonka as well. Passed it to Claire, huh?
Yeah.
That's cool. So we thought we would chat a bit about the lawsuit that's going on right now, because there's a lot of noise, and we figure we should be able to speak to our clients. Oh, sorry. Ooh, okay. We should be able to speak from a place of knowledge and confidence when consumers are asking us about what's going on, because there's headlines every day. And go ahead. Yes, you can.
It's fun because I want to spend a lot of time there. One of the things about introducing the three of us is so that you remember that we're not the same brokerage. Although we are all the collective, we are not the same brokerage. So there are certain things we cannot talk about as we talk about commissions. One of them is a commission rate, right? So as Claire shares all this information, we're not going to use we're not going to use numbers. We're not going to do that stuff. And when you do, because sometimes that happens, we'll just say, well, we're not going to do that. There is no average, right? All that kind of stuff.
Anyway, so we just thought we would touch on that regarding, yes, what's been happening in the news. So on a big level, I think just to sort of say what the lawsuit is about, right, is that sellers have gotten together to sue NAR and several brokerages for how commissions have been structured in the past. And so what's at stake is how buyer agents get paid out, and what could potentially happen in the ruling of this lawsuit. And I think the ruling is expected in the first part of November. And no matter which way the ruling goes, there'll probably be an appeal because there's a lot at stake. But we just need to be aware that the conversation has been happening, and that we are probably going to have conversations with our clients that are different than what we've had. And in Minnesota, I think we're very fortunate that we have buyer representation, and we have buyer representation contracts, and we have laws that protect the consumer around representation. There is like up to a third of states don't have buyer representation. And so I think we're a step ahead of some of the other states, because this is going to be a national ruling. And the MLSs, so I'm on the board of directors of the MLS North Star. And I was just at a national conference of MLSs in New Orleans with 500 other MLSs. And, you know, the conversation is, I mean, they're having the conversation, right? Things are changing. We just saw last week that MLS changed the payout from 1 penny to 0 because they're following the NAR reversal on their MLS policy had been that an offer of compensation must be added on MLS. And so for North Star, it has been 1 penny was the smallest amount. And since NAR reversed their stance on a payout must accompany the MLS, our North Star MLS voted to follow suit on the NAR reversal. And so now it is no longer necessary to have a dollar number or percentage as a payout on MLS. So that's just what has happened in the last few weeks.
I would just say on that piece, and speaking of Minnetonka, although, and this might be some of the things that we'll see, although NAR and MLSs have rules, right? Within a brokerage, you can also have different standards within a separate brokerage. So your brokers can talk to you about, hey, at Lakes, what does that look like? At Edina, what does that look like? At Minnetonka, what does that look like? Knowing that now you can offer 0, you used to be able to offer a penny.
Right. I mean, we each, and this is where we're not going to have conversations because we're all in a room, but each brokerage has, has in the past had these standards. And we do business with brokerages in the whole Twin Cities or sometimes in the whole state. And so there are some brokerage models that work on, only paying one side of the transaction. What the overarching conversation needs to be is, and I think, Kevin, you spoke about it very well earlier, and so I think you should maybe have the mic, but having the conversation with our buyers about how we get paid. And we have got to use our buyer representation agreements. In Minnesota, it's the law, period. And it's the law to do it before you start writing offers and showing properties. So I think that we have in the past been kind of lax using them, having the conversation because of how it's always been. And I don't think anybody is expecting things to change next month, next week, next year. It's not going to change across the board because it takes time. This is an industry that involves, you know, so many things, lenders, agents, homeowners, all these things. But what's important is that we have the conversation with our clients on how we get paid, how it's structured. And if they want to see a property that has a 1% payout or a 0 payout, you are obligated under the Code of Ethics to show them that show them that property. How you get paid is determined on what the contract says that you wrote with your buyer and how you had that conversation. You want to talk a little bit about what you said earlier?
We have a couple of questions, so we might want to do first.
Go ahead. Can one of you also just touch on how you're supposed to be talking to sellers about commission? Because I think that even though now our exclusive right to list breaks it down, I think historically listing agents have been maybe not the best at explaining that the seller is agreeing to pay me a certain amount. I, based on the way I run my business, am choosing to pay out to a buyer's agent what I choose. The commission is between the seller and I.
Yeah.
They are not agreeing to pay out the buyer's agent. They are agreeing to pay me. Can you like, go into that?
Just did it.
Well,
I agree.
can you like put a stamp on that? Because I think still I get questions from agents and I'm like, guys, the seller is not agreeing to pay the buyer agent anything.
Right.
That's not how contracts are written.
The initial payment is negotiated between the buyer and the seller. And the whole point of excuse me, I totally misspoke. I'm sorry. That's totally not what the initial percentage of commission or flat fee, whatever is between the listing agent and the seller. That is what's negotiated. And then on our listing agreements, we have a split on how that is split. And so the payout on the MLS is the listing brokerage's agreement to pay the buyer's brokerage. That's what that is. And that has been pre-negotiated between the listing agent and the seller. And it is possible that a seller negotiates with a listing agent to have a 0 payout, that there's nothing left for the buyer's agent. And that's, I guess, what we're talking about here is how then, because you're not going to be able to invest 50% of your income into the stock market if your income is 0. And yeah, I feel like I'm talking. I'd like to pass it off.
I'm going to give it to Matt to share his spot, because the next piece that I think we're really talking about is and Matt always talks about this, what would be best for the consumer, right? And in our contracts that are all written, all say exactly what we should do and make it very, very clear. As Claire just said, the listing contract does make it very clear of how that buyer person going to get paid if someone brings this on there. And so if they say to you know what, I don't think it's fair that you're making more than they do. I'd want you to offer more than this or less than this or whatever, that they can negotiate that right in that contract. And I remember in 2016 when I got into real estate, I joined a team, and before I could ever go out and have a conversation with a buyer, I had to memorize my buyer's contract so I could present it upside down, talk about fees. I could talk about what happens if I typically I'm paid by a listing agent. If I'm not paid by this listing agent, this is what you're responsible for. This is the value that I have throughout that, and we'll bring that to the conversation. I think something has happened since 2016 is that things have just gotten really fast. And a lot of that training that we had about how to sit down and be professional, both on the listing side and across the table on a buyer's consult, kind of went away. And the truth is, everything that we have right now seems really good. If we just read the contract, what does the contract say? Let your consumer see that. So when it says, I get paid blank this is how I get paid, right? Maybe that shouldn't be blank because that's not a real contract. I'm going to hand it to Matt now. And maybe you should be able to defend whatever that number is that you put in there. You have to show this is how I bring value and this is why I'm worth it. So even if I don't get paid by Matt as the listing agent, working with me is more than valuable for that cost that I'm charging you.
All right, fun stuff, huh? So what Kevin was alluding to was the idea that for our consumers, and those are our clients, buyers and sellers alike, the question is, what would the consumer like to know? And that's on the buy side and the sell side. One of the reasons all of us brokerages respectfully require you to submit a seller net sheet is because specifically on that net sheet, it says how much money is going to commission-wise to the listing brokerage and to the selling brokerage. Go back to the question I just asked. Would the consumer like to know? I see many times net sheets unsigned. An unsigned net sheet means what? The conversation never took place with that seller. Another thing that I've learned, and I learned this from a pastor, and it's one of my favorite things to share, and I share it in Edina all the time. This pastor said, the goal of communication, many believe, is acceptance. I said this completely relates to our real estate world because we're all pushing purchase agreements and we're looking for parties to accept them, correct? The real goal of communication is understanding. Do the parties understand what they just signed? Ultimately, that's what these lawsuits are about. So again, from the standpoint of the state of Minnesota, our contracts, looking at all of you in the room and looking at you online, we have a number of different independent businesses here. It's critical that you understand the contracts. Your business relies on your knowledge, your skill set, to actually do said job. So what do you do from here if you don't understand the contracts? This is where you take advantage of the trainings that we offer. This is where you take advantage actually calling one of us in your respective brokerages. This is where you contact someone else within the market center. But ultimately, related to this lawsuit, and all of you in the room and online, what you're wanting to do right now in your business is keep your eyes and ears open. I'm looking at this room, and I know some of you, but two people specifically I'm looking at are Cody and Faye. These are two mentors for me. I started this business 23 years ago. These two individuals have been in it longer than I have. There have been changes in real estate over the years. We're about to experience a new change. This is a good thing. This is a very good thing. So again, just keep your eyes and ears open, rely on your resources, market centers, your colleagues, certainly these forums. If you're not active in your association, which you pay for, pay attention. They're there to help you. They're a wonderful resource. Question.
The impetus for this lawsuit, I mean, what is driving it? Is it the rate increases? What was the catalyst for this lawsuit to begin with?
How much do we really want to talk about that, right?
I mean,
There's some we can say and some we can't say. So I'll pass it to Claire here. She was just at this conference.
I mean, this lawsuit is now coming to trial. It was filed years and years ago, and I think a lot of people thought that the brokerages and or NAR would just settle, and some brokerages did settle and are not part of the lawsuit anymore. So what that doesn't have anything to do with rates per se at all. It has to do with the fact that some sellers in Missouri think that they overpaid commissions. And even though they agreed to those commissions in their listing agreements, and NAR put out a Drive podcast about it, and they talk about how this came. So it might be good if you're interested to learn more about it. But essentially, it's for the money, because everything is usually about for the money. But they want to get paid a settlement, which essentially pays them back the fee for the buyer's agent. That's what it.
So yeah, I'd say the overarching thing is, should sellers continue to compensate buyer's agent, right? Does that raise the cost and make it high? That plaintiff side would say yes, right? And something happened there. And because how we've done that, there's been assumption of a standard rate or any of that kind of. Now, the other side would say, well, actually that protects the consumer because it's expensive, and they want to have someone looking out for the other side, and that's what this is all figuring out. Do we have a huge change and it's no longer the way it is, or is there's going to be some change, right? Is it going to be that, hey, everything needs to be very clear? One of the things we need to say all the time is when we sit down in our listing point, we might have to say everything's negotiable. We're going to have a negotiation about, I don't know, maybe that's one of the things. There's a lot of different ways that it could be played out. One of the things that I personally don't believe is I don't believe the real estate agent's going away. I do believe we have to communicate our value in a new way. And if you're worth it, you have to know why you are worth it. And if you don't figure it out, someone else probably in this room will, right? So we might have fewer real estate agents. That's just kind of a trend, but we got to figure it back out. We are changing. We went from a very fast market. Is the market changing a little bit? Does it feel different, right? Even if all the last month's numbers aren't completely coming in, it feels different, and we're definitely more into what we've been talking for a while, the skilled base spot in getting business, getting things to close, getting things, all that. We got to be more skilled in our stuff.
So looking at the time, what I would add is, again, just be open and available to your market centers, your respective market centers. Read the emails, listen to their information, attend the meetings. You're going to be hearing, and as we're hearing too. And again, sometimes it's not all what's on Inman that's reported there. This is why, again, you want to go to your resources and listen in. The other thing that I would add, and then where I was talking a moment ago about just your skill set and take the time to learn. We've all looked at the buyer's contract, but many of you sitting in the room and online may or may not really understand what that line item says when it says check the box shall or shall not. Because many people, when they learn real estate, sometimes they learn from just another fellow colleague. Oh, this is the way you fill it out. This is the way you do it. Move it forward. You want to go back to that part of the contract and really understand that, because when Kevin just talked about value, this is what all of your businesses are talking about. What is your value that you're presenting in front of a seller or a buyer? If you know that on the contract, then you're going to have no trouble saying, for example, shall not, because if you get 1 cent, and what you're really saying with your buyer is your buyer is responsible to pay you your compensation. And this is where, again, you need to understand, what are you worth? It's kind of like when people talk about facilitation, which is a completely separate subject. Sometimes people do that and they think, well, it's a 1% rate for facilitations. Nope. Everything, again, is negotiable. What is it worth? What's your value in the specific situation? Good?
Can I share what I love about this group? So as brokers, there are things that we cannot talk about, right? We'd start with that. But there are things that we can talk about. And because we're the collective, we have a lot of different contracts that we see and issues that come up. So Claire is very different than I am, not only in gender and stuff, but also in how she thinks, right? And hair color and everything, but in how she thinks. So she's going to think a certain way, and then she'll share that with me, and it'll lead to changing my thoughts, and Brady will change in my thoughts in that way. And one of the things that's really cool about a collective is when it's done well, we all benefit from it. So that's what I would say is invest in the things that the collective is doing. They're doing them for a reason. The leadership is offering things for a reason, and we can all get better together, and that would be a good thing.
Okay, so just after 12, some of you have to run to a meeting or run to your next appointment. I get it, I understand. Bethany's going to play a quick video, and I will actually highlight.
All right, perfect. Thanks, Bethany. Okay, so what this is about, just a little bit of background for you. I am one of you. I've been an agent for 23 years, and I'm always consistently looking at how can I check in with my consumers and how can I connect with them, have a conversation with them, potentially in a non-real estate way. And for the third year, this is being the third year, we've actually looked at connecting with individuals and saying, hey, do you want to be a part of a plank challenge? When I was talking to someone this morning about this, he actually shared a joke with me. And I'm going to share this joke with you because it was pretty funny. He said this fellow went into the doctor to talk to his doctor. He wasn't feeling the best. And the doctor talked to him and diagnosed him. And he said, sir, I'm really sorry that you only have minutes to live. You only have minutes to live. And so the gentleman dropped down on the floor and got into a plank position. And the doctor says, oh my gosh, you only have minutes to live. What are you doing? He said, if you've ever planked, doctor, it takes even a minute can last forever. So exactly. Ha ha. So when we did this, the idea behind it was actually you agents talking to your sphere, your consumers, you're connecting with them and simply saying, you know, and again, we're planking for a purpose. And what that really means is think of a charity that you're passionate about or that you're connected with. And now you're actually going to go to your sphere and say, hey, our office is doing this plank challenge for the month of November. Would you like to participate or would you like to donate? And then all of a sudden they're like, well, tell me more about it. And then you tell them again, this is a charity I'm planking for this year. And then there's a number of different things that we've done. But ultimately what's happened with this challenge over the last couple of years is I'm the one that hears the stories of people doing this. And then they're telling me, they're like, Matt, number one, I wasn't in the physical condition to do a plank challenge, but I didn't realize that this was going to open me up mentally. I'm going through something in my world right now, in my life right now. This plank challenge actually helped me to actually see like, wow, not only can I do this, but again, mentally, I'm like, wow. And so this is one of the things that I just encourage you because like it's that kind of that what if question. Now, some of your business may be where it's been at year after year, or maybe you're having the best year you've ever had in real estate. I'm a broker and I'm looking at the numbers and I know that ultimately about 80% of our agents, their business is down, right? So again, if I'm sitting here and I want to actually connect with my sphere, connect with those people that I know and actually just literally have a conversation with them, that's not, hey, are you looking to buy, sell, or invest in real estate today? This is something that can really be powerful for you because it gives you an opportunity to be in relationship with someone for the month. And so again, if you have more questions, you know, feel free to contact me. But as an agent, and when I was working here with Cody has since left, but I was one of the original like 25 agents in this market center. And we were in the basement of the Citadel building. And this is where, again, it's like we're coming together as groups and we're like, what do we do? And like, we got to do some things together. And I remember when Christy Christensen and I, we developed our first pumpkin giveaway. You know, and we're doing these things, but that's really what this is. This is an event. And those of you that do events, is the event about the people that show up? The answer is no. The event is about your invitation for people to actually participate. Then you get a chance to follow up with them. So if your business is down, I'm just encouraging you to literally broadcast this out to your sphere and simply ask the question, would you like to plank or would you like to donate? And then they're going to ask more questions. Tell me more about it. And then it gives you an opportunity to say, hey, this is what I learned from our office. And as Kevin noted and Claire noted, we're an office group of 4 offices right now, a collective group. But again, it's giving you a reason to connect with your sphere, the consumers out there. How many in the room know Jason Abrams? Does anybody know Jason Abrams? He's the head of industry for Keller Williams International. And it has been a passion of mine to get somebody on the KWRI board to do the plank challenge over the last 2 years, specifically this year. Julia, many of you know Julia, she's in. Okay. Well, on Monday, I've been hammering Julia, Mark King, and Jason Abrams. And then we have a call every Monday at 11 o'clock. And Jason Abrams called me back at 10:50 because I kept saying, Jason, you got to do this. You got to do this. Because the way I see it is, what if every market center at Keller Williams connected with their sphere and asked that question? Would you like to plank? Would you like to donate? So again, now you've seen with me, and I've seen some of the heads going, yes. Because many times as real estate agents, and what I get as a coach, as a broker, people are like, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say to the consumer. November is gratitude month. And I assure you that if you choose to take this on, don't fear the idea of doing the challenge in the idea that I'm not ready for it, I'm not prepared for it. Day 1 is 20 seconds. Day 30 is 4 minutes. And if you've never done a plank, I will tell you at 2 minutes, which is midway through the month, that's where it gets really difficult. 4 minutes, you'll probably be shaky. So again, the first year, there was a planker named Heidi Butler, John Butler's daughter. 8 minutes and 27 seconds. Last year, she did 10 minutes and 7 seconds. So again, it becomes a big camaraderie thing amongst agents in the offices, but it becomes a very big camaraderie thing with your sphere, if you're willing to connect with them. We had 10 states represented the last year. And again, we gave away $4,400 last year, as you saw in the video. Our goal is 250 people this year, whether it be agents, whether it be consumers alike. We'd love to give away $10,000. And again, just a little bit about the charities. My first year, I have 6 kids with my wife. We oftentimes refer to them as yours, mine, ours, and somebody else's. So that's our family. And so the first year I did this, Minnesota Adult Teen Challenge was a big charity of mine for me because one of our daughters was going through some challenges in that way, in that arena. So again, I put that down as my charity of choice. Well, again, as it finishes, in that first year, as it finished, the charities that won money or received money, if you will, were the ones that their plankers finished the 4 minutes. Well, I finished the 4 minutes, but my name wasn't drawn. But what happened was Minnesota Adult Teen Challenge still received $1,000. And I was like, how did they get $1,000? That was my charity. So a loan officer who was a part of the challenge that year said he was going through all the different charities because we advertise you, or we request that you actually put the link out there so others can learn who your charities of interest are. So this loan officer said, I love that too. I know someone that's been through that. Wonderful charity, wonderful organization. So again, even though I put it out there, I didn't win. Minnesota Adult Teen Challenge won. Last year, we modified it a little bit where we actually had 3 individuals that didn't complete the full challenge, right? They didn't complete the full challenge, but they still received $250 grants to their charity of choice. So again, this year, based on how much money we receive, will determine how much money we give away to the people that just register, sign up, and how much money we will give away for those people that complete the 4 minutes. 18% of the people finished last year, the 4 minutes. I'm honest, it's not easy. And that's why it's called a challenge. But I will tell you personally, it's a wonderful thing mentally to not just push yourself, but to see where you can actually go. And so I encourage you to do that. Another cool thing is it's a great family challenge. It's a wonderful family challenge that serves through the month of November to actually do together. My next door neighbor has done it both years. She's a single mom. And this year she goes, Matt, is there an age limit on the challenge? I said, absolutely not. And she goes, because I love my daughter Addie, who's 10, to do it because she's in swimming and so forth, and she's doing these things. So Addie's already signed up. She's the youngest person we have so far. Last year we had one 80-year-old and two individuals in their mid-70s. One of those was John Butler. So again, anybody can do it. And again, it's something that I would just encourage you to actually have a fun conversation with your sphere, with your consumer, let's say, group, because again, many of us are like, I don't know what to talk to them about. And sometimes that gratitude message is more of like, oh, just, hey, what are you grateful for? I'm grateful for this. But this is cool when actually you start to see all the different charities of interest. Any questions? Thanks for sticking around. It's 12:19. Have an awesome rest of your day.
Chicken salad in the back.